There are moments when the ground beneath your feet isn't as solid as you thought. When the applause dies down and you're left with the echo of your own name. When the crown you fought so hard to wear becomes the very thing that crushes you. Welcome to Beyond Belief, a podcast for anyone who's ever wondered if there's more to life than what we can see, touch, or conquer. This is where we slow down long enough to hear the ancient stories speak into our modern chaos. Today's episode, The Weight of the Crown, a story about power, pride, and the terrifying mercy of a God who refuses to share his glory. So, I need to tell you about one of the most uncomfortable realizations of my life. And I want to be honest here, because I think we do this thing where we listen to podcasts or sermons and assume the person talking has it all figured out. Like they arrived at some mountain of wisdom and they're just dispensing it down to the rest of us. But that's not me. That's not this. I'm just someone who's made a lot of mistakes and is trying to pay attention what they taught me. A few years ago, I became a youth leader at my church. And I need you to understand, I didn't grow up wanting to be in ministry. I wasn't one of those kids who practiced sermons in the mirror. I kind of stumbled into it. A friend of mine was a youth pastor and he was overwhelmed. Teenagers everywhere, questions everywhere, energy everywhere. So he asked me if I could help. Just show up, keep order, make sure nobody accidentally broke a window. And I said yes. Not because I felt called to leadership, not because I wanted influence, simply because I cared about those kids. For the first few months, it was beautiful. I showed up, I listened, encouraged, handed out snacks, learned names. That was it. But slowly, so slowly, I didn't even notice. Something began to shift. When you're standing at the front of the room, even if it's just a room full of teenagers, people start treating you differently. The students started coming to me with things they weren't telling anyone else. Their parents' divorce, their anxiety, their loneliness, their questions about God. Questions I wasn't remotely qualified to answer. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I started feeling important. Not powerful, not famous, just needed. And being needed can become addictive. I remember one Friday night in particular. I had prepared a message about identity. Looking back, it was far too ambitious for a room full of teenagers who were mostly thinking about their phones, but I gave it with everything I had. I told stories. I got emotional. And when I looked around the room, people were listening, really listening. Afterwards, students gathered around me. They thanked me. They told me it helped. One of the students looked at me and said, "You're the only adult who actually listens to us." And I felt it, that warmth, that expansion in my chest, that rush. And here's what scares me. It wasn't because I felt seen. It was because I felt validated. I drove home replaying that moment, checking my phone, hoping someone would text me about how well things had gone, rehearsing the compliments, reliving the applause. And when I got home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, and I had a question I couldn't shake. Why am I really doing this? Had I started because I loved these kids? Or had I slowly begun to love being needed by them? I sat on the edge of the bathtub and realized something unsettling. Those Friday nights had become the place where I felt significant. And I wasn't just serving anymore. I was drawing identity from it. I wasn't just helping people. I needed people to need me. And in that moment, I saw something I never wanted to admit. I wasn't serving those kids. I was using them. Now, maybe you've never stood in front of a youth group. Maybe you've never preached a sermon. Maybe you've never led anything official. But I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what it feels like to become addicted to being needed. Maybe you're the fixer in your friend group, the one everyone calls during a crisis. Maybe you're the unofficial expert at work, the person nobody can function without. Maybe you're the peacemaker in your family. Maybe you've built a platform online. Maybe your identity is tied to your success, your intelligence, your appearance, your influence. Whatever it is, every single one of us is building a kingdom. Maybe it's tiny. Maybe it's only a handful of people. But we're building something. And deep down, we're hoping someone will crown us king of it. So let's talk about Herod. Because Herod understood crowns. Acts chapter 12 introduces us to a man at the absolute height of his power. And before we judge him too quickly, we need to understand him. Herod Agrippa I was no fool. He wasn't merely insecure. He was brilliant, politically gifted, deeply ambitious, and remarkably skilled at navigating power. But like many people, he eventually began believing his own applause. Herod had grown up in Rome. He knew emperors. He knew influence. He understood how the game worked. And through a series of political alliances, strategic friendships, and extraordinary opportunities, he rose from financial ruin to royal authority. His territory expanded. His reputation expanded. His power expanded. By the time we reach Acts 12, he carried an extraordinary title, King of the Jews. A title loaded with irony, because the true King of the Jews had already come. And Herod was sitting in a seat that ultimately belonged to somebody else. Luke tells us Herod had begun persecuting the church. James was executed. Peter was imprisoned. And when Herod saw public approval, he just doubled down. Because that's what power does when applause becomes oxygen. It starts living for the crowd. Then comes the moment everything changes. The setting is not Caesarea Philippi, it's Caesarea Maritima, a magnificent Roman city on the Mediterranean coast, a city built to display wealth, power, prestige. The theater was packed. Delegations from all over were present. The sun is descending towards the sea, and Herod enters wearing his royal robes. Historian Josephus tells us those robes shimmered in the sunlight, almost glowing. The perfect image, the perfect stage, the perfect moment. Herod sits down on his throne and begins to speak. Now, we don't know what he said, but we do know how the crowd responded. The voice of a God and not of a man. And Herod says nothing. No correction, no humility, no redirection, no acknowledgement of God. He simply absorbs it and lets the praise settle on him. He allows the crowd to place on his head a crown no human being was created to wear. Listen to the text. On an appointed day, Herod put on his royal robes, took his seat upon the throne, and delivered an oration to them. And the people were shouting, "The voice of a God, and not of man." Immediately, an angel of the Lord struck him down, because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. Immediately, not years later, not eventually, Immediately, an angel of the Lord strikes him. And Luke tells us why. Because he did not give God the glory. Now, this is where we need to be careful. Because the point of this story isn't that God is insecure. It's not that God's ego got bruised. The point is something much deeper. God's judgment wasn't arbitrary. Herod's destruction reveals what happens when human beings attempt to occupy a place that belongs to God alone. He stepped into a role he was never designed to carry. He attempted to absorb glory instead of reflect it. And that always ends in collapse. Because human beings were never created to be the center. We were created to point beyond ourselves. We were made to reflect glory, not absorb it. That's why the image of the worms matters. It's shocking, disturbing, uncomfortable, and intentionally so. Because beneath every title, every platform, every achievement, every crown, we remain mortal, dust, dependent creatures sustained by the breath of God. And Herod forgot that, and reality reminded him. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us are not in danger of becoming kings, but all of us are in danger of becoming little gods, the center of our own universe, the hero of every story, the source of our own identity. And that's a burden no human soul can carry, which is why the story is actually good news. It's not meant to terrify you. It's meant to free you. Because maybe you're carrying a crown right now. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your reputation. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your ministry. Maybe it's your intelligence. Maybe it's your spirituality. Maybe you've become the savior of everyone around you. Maybe you've become exhausted trying to hold together a kingdom God never asked you to build. Can you feel the weight of it? The pressure? The anxiety? The constant fear of losing it? Here's an invitation. Take it off. Just take it off. You don't have to be the point. You don't have to be the source. You don't have to be the savior. You don't have to be the king. You never were. This is what Jesus offers. Rest. Not merely physical rest, but soul rest. Relief from self-creation. Freedom from maintaining an image. Release from carrying a crown that was slowly crushing you. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Because the gospel is not an invitation to become impressive. It's an invitation to become free. And I think that's a message our culture desperately needs. Because we live in an age obsessed with glory. Everyone can build a platform. Everyone can build a brand. Everyone can become a public figure. And once again, those things aren't inherently evil, but they become dangerous when they become our identity. We're measuring worth by visibility, value by statistics, significance by reach. And the church is not immune. Sometimes we're just as captivated by platforms as everyone else. We celebrate influence. We reward charisma. We elevate personalities. And then we're shocked when people collapse under the weight. But crowns have always been heavy. And human beings were never meant to carry ultimate glory. Only Christ can do that. So what do? First, practice deflection. When someone compliments you, receive it gracefully, but silently redirect the glory to God. Secondly, build communities of honesty. Find people who can remind you who you are, People who love you enough to tell you the truth. People who aren't impressed by your crown. Thirdly, learn to delight in obscurity. Jesus spent 30 years in Nazareth before beginning his public ministry. 30 years. Faithfulness before visibility. Character before platform. Presence before influence. Your life does not have to be seen to matter. Your worth is not determined by your reach. Your significance is not measured by your status. You are loved because you belong to God. So, wherever you are right now, driving, walking, lying awake at night, I want you to imagine the crown. See it clearly. The thing you've been carrying, the thing you've been protecting, the thing you've built your identity around. Now reach up, take it off, set it down, and breathe. You don't have to be God. You never did. You simply have to belong to Him. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. So here's my challenge. For the next 7 days, every time you're tempted to absorb the glory, reflect it instead. Every time you're tempted to make yourself the center, point beyond yourself. Every time you're tempted to build your kingdom, remember whose kingdom will actually last. The goal isn't false humility. The goal isn't pretending you're worthless. The goal is freedom. Freedom from the exhausting burden of self-exaltation. Freedom to love God. Freedom to love people. Freedom to stop performing. Freedom to rest. May you know the joy of not being the point. May you discover the freedom of reflecting glory rather than absorbing it. May you find people who remind you that you are mortal. May you build a life that doesn't depend on applause. May every false crown fall off your head. And may you rest in the love of the one who already knows you completely. The one who already sees you fully. The one who already calls you his own. May you be free. May you be whole. May you be his. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for being willing to sit with difficult truths. And thank you for having the courage to take off the crown. If this episode encouraged you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because chances are, someone you know is carrying a weight they were never meant to bear. And maybe this conversation will help them put it down. Until next time, remember this. You were never meant to be worshipped. You were meant to be free. Go live it. God bless.